Welcome to another edition of Living with Purpose. Today, I have a dear friend and colleague, Rajeev Agarwal, who I've known for 25 plus years. He is the founder and CEO of MAQ Software. But besides running this amazing company, he is somebody who, since the very beginning, has been investing back into India, into the community, focused on empowerment, education, and now he's focused on health and eyesight. So we are going to get a wonderful journey from him. So please join me in welcoming Rajeev. Rajeev, welcome to Living with Purpose.
Thank you, Akhtar, for including me and inviting me. And thank you. It's a great opportunity to share my story with your listeners.
Before you start off, I also want our listeners to know Rajeev Agarwal has written several books. I would really urge you to go look him up and read some of his work, which actually talks about how you learn and how you unlearn and how you learn again. So with that, Rajeev, let's start off with your life story, where you were born and the family you grew up in.
I was born in a small town in Uttar Pradesh called Shahjahanpur, which is one of the now 75 districts of UP, which is the northern states. It is one of the largest states in India by population, and it's the second poorest large state in Uttar Pradesh. So in terms of my family, both my parents were working. My father is a practicing lawyer or attorney even today. He's over 80 years old. And my mother was a school teacher. She ultimately retired as a school principal. After 42 years in service, she started working at the age of 18. We grew up in a modest house. My parents still live in the same house. And my brothers and I, we went to government inter college in Shahjahanpur, which is a Hindi medium school. It's one of the GICs, we call it. That was there in every district. Now they have added number of GICs. And then I was fortunate enough to get into IIT.
Which is the Indian Institute of Technology for our listeners.
Yes. So I was fortunate to get into the oldest IIT and the largest IIT, which is Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur. And there I graduated in 1986. And then I came to the US for higher studies. Then I worked, and finally I got my MBA from Michigan, and then I joined Microsoft.
So before we come, you also had the very extraordinary experience of just how your parents got you educated. So can you just share a little bit, and the fact that you did qualify for the IIT through the exams, etc. So just talk a little bit about that so people kind of get an understanding of coming out of a small town and growing up there.
Yeah. So this is the internet days for younger audience. So at that time, there was really a lot of asymmetry of information in 70s and, early 80s for sure. So that means most people outside of metros, which is the large 4 or 5 big cities, they don't have access to the same information that you have otherwise. So unfortunately for me, I had never heard of IIT. So in my town, we had heard of an university called Roorkee University, which was in the same state at the time in Uttar Pradesh. But when I focused on excellence, I said, which is the best engineering college? I want to aspire for that. Somehow I got to know about IIT through actually an advertisement for postal correspondence for IIT. We used to get Hindustan Times, which is a Delhi-based newspaper in English. And I used to look through it, and every year in summer, they would publish a list of 25 out of 100 rankers that took their correspondence courses. That's how I found out about IIT. So then I asked one of my friends, so I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to go study for IIT exam. And I said, is IIT better than Roorkee? He said, yeah, absolutely. So I had a little bit of trouble convincing my parents that I should really aspire for IIT as opposed to Roorkee, which was better aligned with UP board curriculum, which is what I was part of. But I was fortunate enough to get into IIT, and The odds were against me because I did not know anyone who had ever gone to IIT. I did not know how hard it would be. I had really no coach or role models. So I couldn't really guess. There was a lot of, I would say, uncertainty, anxiety that am I on the right path? And obviously, I had to overcome the doubt my parents had because as a parent, I always want safety for my kids. They wanted me to take the safe choice and instead try for rookie. And whereas I was focusing on the IIT path, which is not, familiar to them. And they said, look, you are not going to do well in the board and you're not going to get into IIT. And then you are losing the rookie option also if you get in, if you don't get in. So there was, obviously those were my teenage years, a lot of peer pressure and, formative years. I was able to overcome some of those odds by persisting and really ignoring what others had to say, avoiding peer pressure and some of those things. Hindsight, it looks easy, but really it was stressful at the time, being the, not following the herd, so to speak. But IIT was fortunate. I got into IIT and it was its own ecosystem. It's one of the most prestigious and well-resourced universities in India, even today. A lot of government money, a lot of very bright people, very good professors, and whole different ecosystem. So it was really eye-opening for me and very game-changing for me in a sense that your self-image changes. It's not really the classes they teach you, but really the time you spend there. Your self-image changes and the alumni and some of the leaders, the way they talk, the issues they discuss, it really pushes you forward.
So you went to one of the most prestigious things. You had this 4 years, and then you decided to come to the US. And obviously, you went to the Ross School of Business, which is again another very prestigious institute. And then you landed at Microsoft. Is that your first job coming to Microsoft, or did you work somewhere else before coming to Microsoft?
Yeah, so I came to the US for graduate school in engineering because that, to come to the US, I needed the assistantship or the scholarship. So I went to Iowa State University and I completed my master's in engineering. And I worked for 3 years in a nearby town and at a company called Frigidaire, which is owned by AB Electrolux now. Then I got some experience and then I was able to get into the business school because even today, I think to get into good business school, you need industry experience so that some of the discussion is relevant to what you're learning. And I was not comfortable with the idea of experience, but anyway, I had no choice. I was told that I have to get the experience and otherwise I won't be accepted in them. So that's what I did. And then I was basically one of the campus hires from Michigan into Microsoft. So that was a lucky break.
And so you moved to Seattle and you were at the formative time of Microsoft, still a much smaller company than what it is today.
Yeah.
And while working, you also got engaged with the employee giving campaign because you felt that is one way you could invest back into your community. So talk a little bit about that.
Microsoft was at least in those years, Microsoft was in a different league, especially from the leadership down. Now I can look back and reflect on it. And they were really committed to the program you ran, which is the Microsoft Giving Campaign. And they really had very good employee matching, program, matching funds from employees and all that. So towards the later part of the year, I was able to take advantage of that to see how I could support some of the charities that were working in the field of education. But when I thought about my charity work with my own life and some of the other people, that education is a great equalizer. That's how I was able to compete with some of the other people and get to where I am today. So I wanted to focus on that alone. Just very narrow focus as opposed to sprinkle some powder everywhere or some resources everywhere. So in that context, I was able to take advantage of some of that work. Obviously, there were a lot of giving campaigns and leaders and managers and directors and VPs. They encouraged all of us and we did in our own ways whatever we could contribute. And towards the later part, we obviously maximized the matching program contributions to fund some of these charities.
What is actually very interesting is that you decided to become an entrepreneur. and start a company. And yet, with that company, which has its own challenges, where Microsoft is in some ways a safe environment, you get your salary, you can decide how much funds you want to allocate and not allocate towards certain causes. But you're within the company itself, you and your wife, Arpita, were both at that same time committed to ensuring that as you were opening up your offices around in India, you're also providing opportunities for the underserved youth to learn technology. So talk a little bit about what was the driver there.
Yeah. So in societies like India, there is a shortage of resources, specifically capital. And when I go back to 2000, 2001, or even 2002, the computers and access to internet was not so common. So most individuals in India would not, especially in the lower half of the population in terms of by income, they would not have access to internet or familiarity with internet, and certainly at the school level. So we said we have all these resources which we are using only 5 days a week. The first office was Mumbai, which you visited, and I don't know if you remember what.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah. When we said, hey, we have all these computers which are lying idle for 2 days a week, which is on the weekends and certainly the evenings. Can we make those available to students where they come in and they can use those computers and essentially utilize without needing for extra, capital expenditure and the maintenance, because they are maintained anyhow. And then same thing for space. It's not used, so we could use it for some of these programs. So we did some of the pilots. We were also mentioned by local, media or whatever, local officials also supported it. But beyond a point, we could not scale it. Obviously, we had limited infrastructure and obviously it required a lot more commitment. So then when we moved forward, we started focusing on one of the districts, which is where I grew up, which is where I was born, because I knew a lot of people there. And because my mother was also in education, she knew a lot of the school principals and all that who were basically her colleagues. So I had some level of credibility. So I thought I'll work with that system to make an impact. Because if you go to a different town or different school system where no one knows you, you're really an outsider with really no credibility, no assurance that this is for real. So one of the programs we did where my mother used to teach before she retired was focus on STEM education for girls. So she was principal for one of the all-girls schools. So we were able to set up a science block where now 20, 25 years later, over 5,000 girl students have been able to complete science portion. So they qualify for medicine and engineering. Again, very low income families, low resource families, but they got that opportunities and we got it done. And then similarly, we ended up doing a lot of these things over similar things for promoting STEM education or science and mathematics education. There's not that much technology, so STEM means tech, but really it's science and mathematics for some of these high schools in that.
So tell me, how many centers did you establish?
So I think if I fast forward 2017, 2018, which is, so let's just focus on last 5 or 6 years. I always, and you and I had talked about, how we could use digital education. You had mentioned this lady in Lucknow who had CDs, post-state.
Yeah.
Some tendon or somebody like that. I don't know if you remember her name.
Yeah, I actually about, I see her face, but I'm forgetting her name.
Yeah, I think it was some lady like that. So essentially how to bring best teachers, because a lot of these schools don't have very good teachers. And in many cases, on the internet, it was very hard to even imagine what great teaching looked like. Because unless you were in the classroom, you wouldn't know that. And most of us would not be able to get access to those classrooms because they're not set up for us. So one of the things we talked about was, I don't know if you remember, is how to bring some of the best teachers to some of these classrooms. So by 2017, and I was always inspired by what Khan Academy was doing and some of the work that that organization has done, promoting mathematics throughout the world. But the challenge I faced was in some of these schools, we did not have reliable electricity or internet. So in 2019, electricity became a thing. So after Prime Minister Modi came and, the new current chief minister, he came, they had made necessary investments where electricity became real. So you could actually get electricity for almost 18 hours a day, or in many cases, 20 hours a day. So that became real. Second was really I needed internet, because internet is again another great equalizer, because once you are on internet, we could access all kinds of information. So that also became with Geo affordable and widely available and reasonably affordable. So once I realized that, we really worked with Mr. Imran Khan, who was actually a retired teacher from Islamia Boys Inter College, who I approached him. I said, hey, I would like to try this experiment where I would use internet to teach mathematics. We said, look, I'm already retired from my school, but I have access to Islamia Girls Inter College, which is called National Girls Inter College. It's all girls inter school. He said, you can do that there. I said, okay, I will. So I showed up literally with 5 Chrome boxes. These are small mini PCs. And I worked with the local Dell dealer. I said, can you set me up with basically monitor, keyboard, mouse, and all that, and internet connection? And I would just plug them in and introduce the students to Khan Academy, and more importantly, to teachers. So that was our first pilot. And then, since I was not local all the time, he said, look, man, this school ends at 1 o'clock, and all these girl students, they are standing outside in the line to play on the computer and try the computer. And this is May. Very hot in that part of India, like extremely hot. So for students to be so motivated and excited about just a simple thing which we take for granted in our part of the world, it was very encouraging, and basically we were able to get that going. And then slowly we worked, and more importantly, our company got involved. So there were many people, especially director Naveen and one of the managers, Rohit. They really understood what we were trying to do. And because we had been talking about it and doing some of these things in pieces, but really not consolidating it. And partially we were handicapped because we really didn't have access to proper electricity and internet. Safety was also a concern at that time. So initially we were skeptical whether, students would be safe, especially girl students in after school hours. So we worked through some of those issues. Obviously, law and order has improved quite a bit. So that became another enabler where parents felt comfortable that it is okay for students to go to school on holidays and weekends and all that. So that's how we did our first one. And then we expanded to 6 schools, intermediate schools, high schools in my hometown. Then we went to a nearby district. So I said to Imran Khan, or rather Iqbal Saab, I said, Nawab, can you connect me to your counterpart in Bareilly? Where he said, yeah, I have Islamia Girls Inter College in Bareilly.
It's a neighboring town, which is one of the larger neighboring towns.
Yeah. So I can connect you to that principal. So he sent his son, and this principal, Dr. Chaman Jahan, she actually got the Best Teacher of the Year award from state of Uttar Pradesh last year, which is remarkable. Like remarkable by our current chief minister. So that really, so she took it upon herself. So she latched onto it and she really took off. And then with the boys side, Islamia boys side, we were less successful because the management and principal at that time were not engaged. But now we have been able to expand that to many other schools. But to answer your question, now we are in 140 secondary schools. We have 140 centers like that. These are computer labs or digital classrooms where we use online resources, including Khan Academy, in Hindi, to help students prepare for scholarships, for board examinations, and whatever else. And one of the requirements we have is each high school where we get involved, we have to have 1,500 students. If you do the math, on an average, 140 times 1,500, we come to the number of about 200,000 students. So we are providing access to 200,000 students, essentially year round. So we are following another model, which came from another flagship scheme that NITI Aayog has put together, which is called Atal Tinkering Scheme. ATL, not scheme, Atal Tinkering Labs. So these are labs NITI Aayog or Government of India is funding, not necessarily in the same demographic where we are operating, but at the higher level where they basically give grants to schools to teach entrepreneurship and again experimentation. And essentially it was one of those garage kind of setup where you can tinker. So we saw how this model could be implemented for classroom kind of setting where we would have digital classrooms. So that is what we did and we have. And the template we put together, in 2019, we still follow that with a slight variation. One is that our labs run 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which is unusual and unthinkable in states like Uttar Pradesh, where, holiday is a holiday, you don't go to school. That's the convention. And whereas our students that we are working with, they have such a gap or backlog to catch up to. They're so behind that to really change the mindset that it is okay to study on Eid. It's okay to study on Diwali day. Diwali you celebrate for an hour or 2 hours, right? You don't need to take the whole day off. You can still spend half an hour or an hour doing your math exercises or reading a book and things like that. But the main thing for us was getting access to these students because the students we are targeting is the lowest 20% by income group. So all of the schools that we work with, support, they are not allowed to charge any tuition. So they are not like private schools. So they are basically government aided schools. These are state government aided schools, UP government aided schools. So only the lowest 20% by income students choose to go there. But they have no other resources. They cannot even spend 300 or 500 rupees a month to go to a quote unquote private school, low-cost private school, which right now controls probably 50% of the education in India. That's where most of the students go. 50% of the students go to low-cost private schools.
And I did that too.
Yeah. So that is not the population we are working with. So a lot of these families have low resources and very low level of awareness. Some of the parents, especially fathers, if you ask them which grade is your child in, they would not have it. They would not even know that because they're just so busy managing their daily livelihood and just survival. And that it's really heartbreaking. So any support, any guidance we can give to these kind of families is amazing. I mean, I know a lot of people who are doing great work, but to be able to get to such a large group in a meaningful way is amazing. India, as you know, it has another issue, right, which is the demographics.
Yeah.
Right now, we have the demographic dividend working in our favor. And every nation gets only that opportunity only once in the life of the nation, where you have the demographic dividend. And some experts will argue that we are wasting it away. In other words, we are not training our youth to become a productive member of the society when they grow up. So we really have to invest in every one of them, especially some of the larger states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, where there is such a backlog for such a long time. I mean, there's just so much work to be done. So we run our schools starting at 6 a.m., 7 days a week. So which was, again, a no-no, but we are now we have been successful in changing the mind. And naysayers, but now we have 140 schools to show. Second thing we do is we hire local youth who become lab attendants, not teachers. They are not teachers. Teachers is Sal Khan or Khan Academy that is teaching.
Right.
Otherwise we hire local youth, they themselves don't know the material. So how can they teach?
Right.
What will they teach? Because they themselves have not studied. So if you rely on that, then our program would be training. So we wanted to take advantage of, your ideas around digital, how to utilize digital to benefit these students. So one of the metrics we have is to see how many grade 6 students have completed Khan Academy, which is their grade appropriate.
Right.
Which is relevant to their classroom curriculum. Because the problem with learning is if you teach me something which is not useful, which is not relevant to me in the classroom, I'm not interested.
Right.
And once we engage with the society, we stumble on other ideas, great people. One of the things that we talked about was this Government of India has a flagship program or National Merit Meals Scholarship. So Ministry of Education in India has two flagship schemes. This is the largest one, which obviously most of the listeners of this podcast would not know about because we are not the target group. But this scheme gives 100,000 scholarships every year to students who went to state schools, basically schools that are run by municipalities. But Kendriya Vidyalaya, for example, which is central government school, those students are not allowed to participate in it. So the idea is to go to the lower income segment, and go as broadly as possible. And these 100,000 scholarships are then further divided by state based on their population, student population. So state of Uttar Pradesh has 15,143 scholarships. So when we learned of the scheme right after COVID in 2021, the number of forms for 15,000 scholarships was like 2,000 from the whole state, 3,000. And so we latched onto it. So first thing was we said, okay, how can we engage and help students fill the form so that all their ID, their name matches the school enrollment, their Aadhaar card matches school enrollment, all these kind of things. Father's name matches, they have income certificate, which matches their name, all of those logistical things. Because, if you're poor, you just can't say, oh, just go on internet and download it.
Right.
There's no internet to download, right? I mean, you don't even know how to do that. They don't have cell phones, which you take for granted. Or cell phone number is not same every time. So you may have registered it with one number and now you have a different number because, you have bought a prepaid plan and number keeps on changing because sometimes don't have a number for 6 months. You don't need it.
Right.
So just providing that kind of logistical support and then engaging with some of the teachers. One of the teachers I want to highlight for this podcast is Santosh Khare. So he is a second generation teacher. He might be third, I don't know. But his father, I'm told, was also a teacher. But we ran into him through a social media post that, hey, there's such a scholarship. Let's motivate students. And somehow when we looked for the scholarship on internet, we couldn't find it. But we persisted. We called him. He's in a small town called Pilibhit, one of the better teachers that I've come across. And, we partnered with him and he publishes study guides. So we purchased and distributed thousands of study guides so that a lot of the students across the state have access to sample examination papers. Because the test is basically 50% is IQ, cognitive ability, and 50% is basically rest of it, which is 10% or 15% is mathematics, science, and all that. And then some of it is general knowledge. So what is the state or capital of Assam?
Right.
Those kind of questions. So just increasing that awareness. And these are facts. Either you know it or you don't know it. Just helping students prepare for it. And then what we have been able to do successfully is gradually. So first year we got engaged. We had 101 students win the scholarship out of 15,000. And last year, which is 2025, we had 741 students win the scholarship.
Wow.
On their own, which if we are not supported, I would say if we are not engaged others, probably half of them would not have probably appeared for the exam or qualified for the exam. And these are talented, intelligent students. It's just providing the necessary guide and the support system.
Right.
Just mentoring, just being the enabler. It's really not anything more than that. And just showing that better is possible. So what is the impact? Impact is, last time I counted, it's like over 10 crores, over $1 million that will go to these families in one of the second poorest state of Uttar Pradesh. And these are poorest of the poor families.
Yeah. Which is astounding.
Yeah, which is, like a huge relief because a lot of these girls then are motivated to finish high school. Otherwise, their parents will say, well, what are you going to do? What good is it going to do to stay in school? Let's do something else with life because it's more urgent. But with the scholarship, parents have the pride and the pressure to, let the girl continue and, at least finish the high school. And then new avenues open up. Next thing we're able to do is essentially not solve, but basically help with the employability question.
Like,
Now we have more than 400 youth that are working in these computer labs, digital classrooms. And these are local youth that we hire. We give them a stipend, but they have to follow the same routine and the discipline. But they don't know what discipline is because they don't have many role models in their life. So we work with them to help them complete some of these courses themselves. And it's like a graduate assistantship where they can study their own material because labs are not busy during, when regular classes are going on. They can study for it. They can prepare for competitive exams. Essentially, they have access to a clean classroom where we spend the time because a lot of these staff members don't have a room to read in their house where they can quietly study. And there's no public library where they can go to. So one room, 5% or 6% family is staying. I know it's a long-winded answer, but I wanted you to get full context.
yeah. No, but this is incredible, right? So just for our listeners, I mean, it's not a piecemeal set of investments, right? It is a very consolidated approach of finding the right content, making it available in the right medium, in the right language, in the right approach.
Yeah.
And then layering it on with support so that students can actually, after completing this, have the opportunity to move forward. And again, this is all behind this whole idea that India is sitting on this gold mine, which is going to get wasted if we don't capture the youth dividend in the next decade. And otherwise, it's gone. And then you're really not going to be on that path of economic growth. So within that thing, you now have this incredible work that you're doing focused on education, learning, technology. And now you've actually come up with something very different and new that you are pursuing, which is more focused on health and eyes. So talk a little about why that shift came about and what are you doing?
So in most families that are in, let's say, bottom 50%, I mean, that's probably true for every family, including mine. They have a family member that has health issues. Some of them are simple, some of them are more expensive and complex. And so I kind of knew that. Fortunately, where we grew up, all of my siblings and my parents was healthy. We didn't really have any, long-term issues, at least genetic issues. But, I sort of knew that health and education, those are the two pillars that we need to support. The problem with healthcare is it's very expensive. If you engage, it's really, no one individual, no one in the society can take care of it. But at the same time, a lot of these families, they need the basic support. You really have to engage at some level. And then the question becomes, how do you engage in a cost-effective manner, which you can actually afford? And as you know, in the field of health also, there are hundreds of thousands of organizations that are doing amazing work all over the world at all levels, all the way from vaccine to, immunization and delivery and invention and malaria and all that. But in developing countries, health or investments or low level of investments in health, and especially health-related education, is a huge issue. Just the equipment is not there, trained staff, staff does not have opportunity to get trained and delivery and all that. So for me to support them, really the least expensive or the cheapest way to do that is through eye care. In fact, I think we have talked about it. If you have to donate $100, the most effective use of that $100 is providing cataract surgery. You can restore eyesight. There's no other intervention you can do with $100 that is life-changing. If you just have only $100 to give, that is the cheapest intervention you can do to change someone's life. Everything else is long-term with unknown outcomes. So then I got on that path and I started studying what can be done in that space, who are the best people in the world. And obviously, Arvind Eye Care System is the largest healthcare system in the world. They do 500,000 surgeries, cataract surgeries a year. 50% of the cataract surgeries in the state of Tamil Nadu are done by them. And worldwide, they have supported 350 hospitals in Africa and some of the other developing countries, including Bangladesh, set up hospitals and improve hospital operations. So we are working with them to see how we can reach these families directly to help them. Because once we start engaging, we'll find other avenues where we can go beyond eye care.
Yeah.
But you have to start with eye care. And it's a very relatively low cost intervention where 80% of people who are legally blind in India, they just need eyeglasses, not surgery.
Yeah.
Refraction is all they need. So how to get to these students, some of the cleaning we're doing with some of the sports where we work, we are able to detect some of the early cases where, if we tend to intervene, it will lead to blindness, which is, permanent. So those kind of interventions we are able to do once we have this pool of families that would genuinely use the help and don't have the resources. Because it's the problem, as you know, with charity is targeting. You want to make sure your funds are going to the really needy people as opposed to anyone and everyone who shows up. How do you target your funds to the right people so that they are reaching, you have the maximum impact? I think it's all about impact at the end of the day. So that is what we are doing now. We are on a journey. It's a probably 25-year journey. I plan to be around. But I think we'll see the impact in next 5 to 10 years where we'll be able to make a dent. So if you want to learn more about eye care, I can talk about that. At a high level, eye specialists, especially in community health, they talk about CSR, which is cataract surgery rate, which means how many cataract surgeries were done for 1 million individuals. So in advanced states, countries, it would be about 10,000 per year. 10,000 surgeries are done per million population. So Tamil Nadu and all that, they have the necessary infrastructure if they can do that. Now, if you look at states like Uttar Pradesh with 200 million population, let's say only 200, the number quoted is 240, but let's say 200 million for simple math. So that means you need to have facilities to do 200,000 surgeries easily every year. And right now, if you add up all the hospitals in Uttar Pradesh, eye hospitals, they don't have that capacity. So one is the capacity issue. Plus investing in necessary infrastructure. Then you have the issue of quality and affordability, cost and quality. And all three essentially compete with one another. So it's a three-legged stool. How do you provide high quality at a low cost and in enough volume? Because if you increase volume, your quality goes down, unless you know what you do. So if your quality goes up, generally it costs you more. So how do you balance? So we are working with the L.V. Prasad Eye Institute in Hyderabad, which is another renowned eye institute. We have some friends from the US that are helping the eye surgeons. So Bascom Palmer, which is University of Miami's eye program, which is number 1 in the world. So some of the graduates from there, so we are engaging with them. We see how we can bring the expertise from the US and some of these surgeons to India for these communities, because it's always evolving. The other benefit we have is, and I think we should end there, is how do you take the gift we have with MAQ software into these two areas? So what we are able to do is take advances in AI and software and work in eye care. Not, if we just did what everybody else does, okay, it will be good. It will be amazing. It will be great. But it's not enough. Yeah. So how do you take advances and deliver even better quality at even better prices at a lower cost while improving patient experience in their language, in their context, where it is challenging, right? So a lot of innovation that can be done just in delivery. I'm not talking about invention. And then, of course, if you create a facility where research can be done, which is relevant and all that, that's a bonus. So how to set up training programs for both, fellows, researchers, as well as at the paramedical level.
Well,
So that we are very focused on. We have done that actually. And same thing we're trying to do in education as well, by taking advantage of our expertise or knowledge in providing essentially high school education at a very low cost. Because my goal is to help a student do their grade 6 curriculum for 200 rupees, which is $2.50. 4 years worth of math in $2.50. 200 rupees. Otherwise, it won't scale.
this is for our listeners. I think a fantastic reminder that the mind is a very important thing. And if you can actually apply your mind, you can actually come up with solutions to just about anything. And that's what humanity has done all throughout its history. And what Rajeev has shared is just one individual with some support and collaboration is applying his mind in very different ways outside of what might be seen as his core business and work, which is running a technology company. Rajeev, this has been a fascinating conversation. We can continue, as you know, for a very long time. But let's end with your talking just a little bit about the importance of purpose and then giving us a piece of wisdom that we can all live by.
Yeah. So I would implore, request everyone to get involved, do something. There is no right time. There is no perfect moment. There is no amount of resources that are enough. Whatever we have, let's just get engaged. There's so much happening in the world. There's so much more we have talents for, so much more we have opportunities for. Just go and just engage. If nothing else, go visit a school, go visit an orphanage, go visit a hospital, just do something instead of thinking about the perfect solution. What we have been able to do is just start engaging. And then, as Gates Foundation says, non-profit work is a team sport. Other people will show up out of the woodwork. And once they realize what you're trying to do, what your intention is, they want to support you. So I engage with so many nonprofits from, Sankrai Foundation to Pratham to Ekal and, obviously in India, different organizations. And every one of them is doing amazing work. Just start engaging, understanding. Whatever I'm doing, I've learned from all of the existing organizations, nonprofits. All of them have very compelling founders, very compelling vision, very compelling work. So thank you again for, the Microsoft giving program, running the philanthropy program and supporting some of these organizations and giving a platform and voice to them. And all of us can do something.
Such a great message, right? That we can all just show up.
Yeah.
If we show up and lend a hand, put our shoulder to it, progress happens. Rajeev, thank you so very much for being on the podcast. Again, to our listeners, purpose is that renewable source of energy that continues to drive humanity forward. Show up. Make a difference. Rajeev, thank you very much for being on the podcast.